Honorable Senators, I'm honored to speak to you today from the unceded territories of the Mi'kmaq people. Colleagues, June is Pride Month in Canada. It's time when we celebrate LGBTQ plus people, acknowledge their history, the hardships they have endured, and many still endure, the progress and triumphs they have achieved, and the many contributions they make to our society, our communities, our families, and colleagues, to our Parliament. The June 15th report issued by Stats Canada for Pride Month indicates that Canada is now home to 1 million people who identify as members of the LGBTQ plus community, accounting for 4% of the Canadian population. Colleagues, I rise today to add my voice in support of Bill C6, an act to amend the Criminal Code, conversion therapy, because it is time we demonstrate our respect for the rights of LGBTQ plus Canadians and acknowledge our responsibility to respond to their plea to stop the harm conversion therapy has and is still causing to them. Pride Month would have been a fitting time to pass this long overdue bill. I would like to commend my colleague, Senator René Cormier, on his leadership in sponsoring both this important bill and the previous bill S-202, initiated by our former colleague, Senator Serge Royal. Senator Cormier, you are right. Vous avez raison. It is high time that Canadians stand up for human rights, justice, and compassion. Il est grand temps que les Canadiens défendent les droits humains et réclament justice et compassion. Change does not always come quickly, but change is necessary when we look at the kind of Canada we want for all of us, and in particular for our children and grandchildren. In 1971, former Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau said, and I quote, "There is no such thing as a model or ideal Canadian. What could be more absurd than the concept of the all-Canadian boy or girl? A society that emphasizes uniformity is one which creates intolerance and hate. A society that eulogizes the average citizen is one which breeds mediocrity. What the world should be seeking and what in Canada we must continue to cherish are not concepts of uniformity, but human values, compassion, love, and understanding." End of quote. Colleagues, it is time to stop othering people who do not conform to some artificial concept of what is normal. It is time to stop fearing difference in others. It is time now, more than ever, to embrace diversity. For decades, members of the LGBTQ plus community have faced systemic oppression and violence. They've been told that they are immoral and that they are sick. They have been made to feel like outcasts in their communities, in their congregations, in their workplaces, in their schools, and sadly, sometimes even in their own families. For much of our past, the government has been complicit in this disenfranchisement by criminally charging Canadians with sodomy, banning homosexuals from entering the country, and barring LGBTQ plus people from serving in the Canadian military. The list goes on. In doing so, the government sent a clear message that anyone who was not heterosexual and or cisgender did not belong in Canadian society and would not receive the same rights, freedoms, and protections as their so-called normal counterparts. This is the atmosphere in which conversion therapy came to be. Since the 1950s in Canada, it has been touted as a cure for an entire group of people who were already made to feel like outcasts. A cure for what, I ask? A cure for not conforming to society's heteronormative expectations? Quite simply, a cure for being who they are? Let's be clear, colleagues. Conversion therapy is akin to torture, as Randy Boissonnault, the former special advisor to the Prime Minister on LGBTQ plus issues, has stated. And as much of it is inflicted on children, colleagues, conversion therapy is quite frankly a severe form of child abuse. It has taken on many forms and has been offered by clinical professionals, by religious officials, by community leaders, and by many charlatans. In the Canadian Mental Health Association of New Brunswick's position paper on conversion therapy in Canada, it is stated, conversion therapy dates to the late 19th century when the German psychiatrist Albert von Schenk-Notzing claimed he'd turned a gay man straight through hypnosis sessions and several trips to a brothel. The practice accelerated through the 20th century, even as techniques remain crude and often barbaric. Historian Chris Babbitts has found evidence of the widespread use of ice pick lobotomies on homosexual children in the 1940s and 1950s. Other techniques throughout history involve forced castration of homosexual men and electroconvulsive or shock therapy. End of quote. Honestly, I just shudder when I think of the cruelty and the pain inflicted on innocent people, and in particular on children and youth. George Barasa, a gay gender nonconforming Kenyan living in South Africa and a survivor of conversion therapy, said the following: "Conversion therapy is not a single event. It is a process of continued degradation and assault on the core of who you are. There are often repeated violations in the form of psychological and sometimes physical abuse. It is not one instance. It is a continued sense of rejection. The pressure is enormous." David Kinnetz, a PhD student at the University of Toronto, wrote, "I am a survivor of conversion therapy, and I know firsthand how harmful it is. At 16, I decided to self-enroll in conversion therapy out of a desire to be straight and act in more masculine ways. My formative years were filled with invalidating experiences and heteronormative pressures that led me to the point of thinking that being queer was something that was incompatible with living in our society, forcing me to want to consider changing or taking my own life." Erica Muse, who provided testimony on Bill C-6 to the House Committee on Justice and Human Rights, said, "I'm a survivor of trans conversion therapy at the now closed Youth Gender Clinic at the Center for Addictions and Mental Health in Toronto with Ken Zucker. Dr. Zucker saw me as a patient for 7 years from the ages of 16 to 23. And denied me trans-affirming health care in the form of both hormones and surgery until I was 22. Dr. Zucker interrogated me in talk therapy for hours at a time, inquisitorially attacking, damaging, and attempting to destroy my identity and my self-esteem, and to make me feel ashamed and hateful of myself. Conversion therapy almost broke me, and I live with the physical and emotional scars to this day. Colleagues, there are many different methods used in conversion therapy, many now online, from talk therapy, spiritual interventions, prescribing medication, to more extreme forms. Conversion therapy goes by many different names, including reparative therapy, reintegrative therapy, reorientation therapy, ex-gay therapy, gay cure, and sexual orientation and gender identity and expression change efforts, each with the same goal of changing a person's sexual orientation to heterosexual or gender identity to cisgender. Colleagues, there are no credible scientific studies that can demonstrate an association between conversion therapy and an influence on a person's sexual orientation or gender identity or expression. The Canadian Psychological Association has stated that conversion therapy can result in negative outcomes, such as distress, anxiety, depression, negative self-image, a feeling of personal failure, difficulty sustaining relationships, self-harm, suicide ideation, sexual dysfunction, as well as guilt, helplessness, hopelessness, shame, social withdrawal, substance use, stress, disappointment, self-blame, decreased self-esteem, increased self-hatred, hostility, and blame towards authority, anger, loss of friends, high-risk sexual behaviors, and a loss of faith. In 2012, the World Health Organization stated that conversion therapy poses a severe threat to the health and human rights of the affected persons. The results of the 2019-2020 Sex Now survey found that 10% of respondents had been exposed to some form of conversion therapy in Canada, and that 72% of those started conversion therapy before the age of 20. Amongst respondents exposed to conversion therapy, transgender, Indigenous, racial minority, and low-income persons were found to be disproportionately represented. As Minister Lametti noted in the other place, this data is a significant cause for concern. Not only does conversion therapy negatively affect marginalized persons, but it negatively affects the most marginalized within that group. The Yukon, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, Prince Edward Island, and my own province of Nova Scotia have put in place laws that restrict conversion therapy. Bill C-6 was drafted to protect all Canadian minors from undergoing conversion therapy, either in Canada or abroad. It does this by providing a clear definition of conversion therapy, which you have heard, and by creating 5 new criminal code offenses. To remind you, these are 1, causing a minor to undergo conversion therapy; 2, removing a minor from Canada to undergo conversion therapy abroad; 3, causing a person to undergo conversion therapy against their will; 4, profiting from conversion therapy; and 5, advertising an offer to provide conversion therapy. Bill C6 represents an important step forward in LGBTQ+ rights and sends a clear message to LGBTQ+ youth that no one should be forced to deny who they are. Still, colleagues, Bill C6 answers only one section of a much larger portfolio of issues that need to be tackled in terms of LGBTQ+ rights in Canada. It has been 36 years since the Parliamentary Committee on Equality Rights released its report entitled Equality for All, highlighting the physical and psychological oppression of sexual minorities in Canada. We must continue the progress we have already made and strive to do better in the areas that still require work. The past several years have brought some positive change for LGBTQ+ people around the world. In January 2020, same-sex marriage legislation took effect in Northern Ireland. In May last year, Germany banned conversion therapy for minors. Last July, Mexico City banned conversion therapy. And Sudan removed the death penalty for homosexuality. Yet there are still over 70 countries in the world where being LGBTQ+ is a crime. And colleagues, I'm horrified to say that there are still 6 countries in which it is punishable by death. In nearly 30 countries, the practice of conversion therapy is still supported by the state through private health clinics and schools that provide this service. Colleagues, Bill C6 seeks to ensure that the dangerous and damaging practice of conversion therapy is banned everywhere in Canada, and that our children and grandchildren grow up in a world where it is not only safer to be open about who we are, but where our differences are celebrated and embraced. There is momentum for change, both in Canada and around the world, and we must not let up on this important human rights work. As senators, it is our duty to represent the interests and protect the rights of all minorities in our country, and in particular, the most vulnerable. Colleagues, I support this bill because I believe it is the right thing to do. Our fellow Canadians, and particular children, must be allowed to be who they truly are, to love whomever they want, and to live without fear. Honourable Senators, as I move toward concluding my remarks, I would like to quote Jonathan Brower, a theatre artist and conversion therapy survivor. Jonathan said, "I don't want healing anymore, not from who I am. I just want healing from the scars from trying to change." And finally, colleagues, I thought it was appropriate to quote human rights crusader Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Honorable colleagues, let's move this critical bill forward and continue to bend that arc towards justice for Jonathan, for Erica, for David, and for all LGBTQ+ Canadians. Happy Pride Month, my fellow senators. Merci, thank you, Walalio.